Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
I'm Joe Kent, and I'm running against Marie Perez because we have some big disagreements on how to solve the problems facing Southwest Washington. Prices of essentials like food and gas are at record highs because of out-of-control spending that Marie supports. I'll oppose any new spending that doesn't tame inflation and put us on a path to a balanced budget. Our rivers and forests must be protected and managed with local input, but Marie voted to give unelected DC bureaucrats unlimited authority to regulate them. I'll introduce legislation that returns control to the people and their representatives. We all agree that we need a new bridge, but Marie supports tolls that unfairly tax Washingtonians and light rail that delivers Portland's crime and drugs onto our doorstep. We pay enough in income and gas tax. I'll get the bridge built with no tolls and no light rail. Marie voted against parental rights in education, but as a father of two boys, I understand that you never get between a parent and their children. I'll defend parental rights and expand access to school choice so that the federal dollars follow the students and not the education bureaucracy. And unlike Marie, I'll require that our public schools defend girls' sports and spaces from biological men. My 20 years in our nation's special forces taught me how to solve problems. But what doesn't solve problems is Marie hiding from her own voting record and name calling. Join us to help elect a representative who's committed to delivering solutions that work for the people of Southwest Washington. Sign up to volunteer or donate at joekentforcongress.com.
The fight to defeat Biden's radical agenda and his foot soldiers that implement it. Welcome to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on World YouTube and X Spaces simulcast. Well, there you heard it. Open border policies, skyrocketing crime rates, America's economy is cratering to the point that inflation has average Americans having to choose between putting gas in their cars to get to work or buying groceries to feed their families. And the world's on the brink of what appears to be World War III. These are the circumstances we find ourselves in thanks to Joe Biden and his radical agenda to destroy our country. That's why Americans around the country are stepping up to the challenge. Biden's leftist loyalists in office are implementing this disaster. And Marie Perez ran in Washington State as a moderate Democrat. Imagine that. But her voting record demonstrates how out of step she is with the conservatives in Washington's 3rd Congressional District, and they're in line with Biden's extremist leftist agenda. She votes with the Biden administration's radical agenda to increase inflation, weaken our national defense, and open our borders to criminals and drug traffic and human trafficking and everything else that's not good that comes across that border. Marie takes the exact opposite positions that her American constituents need her to take. And my guest today is that man, Marie's opponent, candidate Joe Kent. Joe, as you heard, is a retired 20-year veteran of our nation's special forces and a widower raising his 2 young sons in Washington State. His first wife, who also served us, was killed while fighting ISIS in Syria, and he's since remarried. Joe, welcome to the Rob Maness Show for the first time.
To be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us, man. You know, I think we covered it. We could just end the show right now. but that's a great ad. I've done ads like that. I'm sure you guys work very hard on it, and I wanted to put that out there when I have a candidate on. I like to show the work that their team is doing and everything, Joe. And I also have to ask this first question, and that is, why are you running?
Because our country's being destroyed. I never thought I'd get involved in politics. I thought that my service to our nation was going to be overseas, working in either special operations with the intelligence community. That all changed when my late wife was killed a month after Trump tried to get our troops out of Syria the first time. So watching the administrative state turn against President Trump, and then seeing that while I was serving overseas, our country back home had really been taken over by an ideology that seeks to destroy the very foundation of our country, whether it's the borders, whether it's our economy, or whether it's taking place in our schools with our kids. I just think we're in a really critical moment, just like we were when we were in the military after September 11th. It was time for us to suit up and go defend our country. That fight is here, and that fight is very much trying to take back Washington, D.C., so that it actually represents the people. That's why I'm in this.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I would never have believed you had you told me on September 1st, 2011, that afternoon, after having fought fires and tried to help people all day long at the Pentagon, and think about what the next steps were going to be, that in 20-something years, I would be sitting here agreeing with somebody who has also served their country for decades, that it's the internal domestic enemies that are the greatest threat to the country. Just in the last 24 hours, I've got some people on X, what used to be Twitter, just trashing me personally as a traitor. I'm dumb, didn't learn anything about anything in my 30+ years of service, etc., just because I insist on due process rights being applied to the January 6th prisoners. That's it. That's what I swore to support and defend, right?
Absolutely. And it's crazy that we're here in this moment right now. I agree with you. If you would have told me after September 11th that I'd be here running for office, and one of the most hot button issues would be, will we defend female spaces, and will we stand against this radical trans ideology that wants to put biological men into the locker room with women? Will we support due process regardless of the political affiliation? I thought that these were things that every single American agrees on. I still think common sense Americans agree on these. I just think our elected officials, our ruling class, has gotten so far disconnected from what actually makes this country great, and they just simply don't reflect the will of the people anymore.
Yeah, I was born in Washington State at McChord Air Force Base. It wasn't a joint base then with Fort Lewis, but the hospital was on Fort Lewis, and my brothers were both born in Spokane. My dad and mom are from West Tennessee. But what I know about Washington State is that district you're in, Joe, is pretty conservative. Farmers, obviously people that want to conserve the environment, because you have hunters, just down to earth working men and women. And to hear that the current congresswoman votes with not wanting to take men out of women's dressing rooms, in athletic dressing rooms, votes with the crowd that wants men to be able to take over women's sports, votes with the crowd that wants to make the U.S. military as woke as possible and hang the pride flag at every government installation that they can find, just puzzles me as to how she could ever win, and what the challenges are for how does she have to present herself, I guess is what I'm asking you, to get the votes of men and women Americans that I know are from the 3rd District that are like that.
Yeah, so I ran last time, lost to her by less than a percentage point. We had a very divided primary. We have late primaries out here too. Our primaries don't take place till August. But last time, Marie Perez, she had the luxury of not having a record, but she has a record this time. So really, if you look at her rhetoric, the way that she speaks like a moderate. She almost speaks kind of like a more centrist type of Republican. But then if you look at her voting record, it's completely opposite. Like, Marie Perez will not come out and campaign on the fact that she voted to put biological men into our daughters' dressing rooms and bathrooms. But no, that's how she voted. She votes with the Democrats 99.9% of the time. And so she's able to come back here to the district and use very, very friendly left-leaning media to portray herself as some sort of a moderate. And this is a game that Democrats are playing really across the board. And so we are going to really just run on the facts. We're going to run on her voting record and common sense solutions to fix them, because this district, as you pointed out, it's timber country. We have a lot of farmers. We have ranchers. soldiers. We've got a growing urban population that wants to not go down the route of Portland or Seattle, that wants common sense law and order. And so the people out here really just want very common sense. They want an economy that they can afford. They want basic law and order and border security, and they want their kids protected. And look, I tell people all the time, like, 10, 15, 20 years ago, these were not massive Republican issues. These were issues that everyone agreed on, but the other side has gone so far off the rails. Here we are being labeled as, far right crazies, when all we're saying is what used to be basic American common sense values. And I think by reaching out and really articulating that to people, we're going to be able to be successful this time.
Yeah, let's take those issues one by one. Let's start with border security and illegal alien immigration, and obviously everything that goes with it. Crime rates soaring through the roof and everything. How has she voted on things like the Mayorkas impeachment, for instance?
Yeah, so she votes to support Mayorkas. She doesn't think he's doing a bad job. She said, oh, the impeachment, that's just a performance measure. She'll say things like, I'm very concerned about the border. But one of the first votes that she took in Congress was against H.R. 2, which would have secured the border. And then she had the audacity to go on a left-leaning podcast and say, look, no one in my district stays awake at night about the southern border. Well, our district, even though geographically we're far from the southern border, we have basically the fentanyl expressway that shoots right up the I-5 corridor. California and Oregon and Washington all have very lax drug control policies. Our police officers have had their hands tied behind their backs. So really, we're on the I-5 corridor, and we've had fentanyl pumped into our district. There's not an event that I go to where someone doesn't come up to me and tell me how they've been personally affected by the fentanyl crisis. These are not, career drug addicts that are dying. These are people that got their hands on an Oxycontin or something like that they didn't think had any fentanyl in it. And the next thing you know, they're dead. And also, we're a sanctuary state. So our governor, our Democrat leftist governor, invites the illegal aliens to stay here and then protects them from the federal government and from ICE. We recently had an illegal alien who should have been deported years ago who killed one of our state troopers. So we are very much on the forefront of this border crisis. It ties directly into the lack of law and order that we've had in our state because of the Democrat policies. So I think people are really getting fed up with this, and they're just very concerned about the safety environment for their children.
Oh yeah, the crime in this country is gone crazy. Just in the last week, from the last weekend up to yesterday, there's a Salvadorian illegal that was arrested and charged for killing the mom, Rachel Marin. The Ecuadorian guy was arrested and charged for raping a 13-year-old girl, and then two Venezuelans for kidnapping and murdering a 12-year-old girl. It's unbelievable. It's unconscionable. What is the excuse that people like Marie Perez give for voting against securing the southern border?
No, she doesn't have one, so she just lies. There's been a few different border bills that have been proposed that basically codify Joe Biden's invasion into law. And she says, well, I'd kind of support something like that. She had this really cute trick she tried to pull where she had a bill that had a bunch of foreign aid for Ukraine and other countries, and it also had a few paragraphs in it about the southern border, but it didn't allocate any money to actually secure the southern border. And she says, well, I've supported these border measures, but she voted against H.R. 2. So really, she relies on a very friendly media to help cover up her tracks. But again, people here, they're common sense. They're smart people. They might not have time to live in the news cycle, but they know how to look up her voting record. And that's really what we're highlighting, because she has no excuse for leaving our district open to the illegal immigrants who are committing crime, to the fentanyl that's killing our fellow citizens. There's just no excuse. And so we're really, really focusing on that and just exposing her record.
So this is interesting, and I got this out of your ad about the bridge. And I'm assuming it's the southern border of Washington State with Oregon. You kind of have to secure that border too, don't you? Because there's a lot of craziness coming out of Oregon, isn't there?
We certainly do. So we're in the shadow of Portland, Oregon. So we're just right across the Columbia. Vancouver is the major city across from Portland. And the saying is keep Portland weird. The saying on our side of the border in Vancouver is keep Vancouver normal. And look, we have a bridge that is on I-5, so it's a clear-cut federal nexus. It's been completely really abandoned by the federal government. So Washington and Oregon have been fighting over how to get this thing fixed. The Oregon side wants to put light rail on the bridge, and obviously the people in Washington State and my district have rejected this. It's actually been on the ballot on 3 separate occasions, and Washingtonians have rejected it for obvious reasons. We don't want downtown Portland's crime and drug dens being dumped into our front yard here. However, Marie Perez has gotten a hold of a little bit of federal funding that comes with the stipulation of putting light rail on the bridge. So her and the Democrats in Washington State and Washington, D.C. and on the Oregon side are circumventing the will of the people of the district, and they're moving ahead, and they want to put light rail on the bridge. And again, we've rejected this. It's the same thing with tolls. A lot of folks in my district work in Portland, so they travel into Portland just to work. And so the Oregon side says, hey, this is a business opportunity. We'll put tolls on this side of the bridge. And so we're getting really, really the raw end of the deal on this as well. And Marie Perez is supporting it just to make it look like she's doing something about the bridge, but it's going to just dump Portland's crime right off in our district. And then also the Washingtonians have to commute into Portland. Their state taxes are going to pay for the bridge. Their federal taxes are going to pay for the bridge, and then if they use the bridge, they're going to have to pay a toll. It's just complete and total. It's a complete and total outrage.
Once again, a leftist politician doing what's not in the interest of her constituents and voters. Well, Joe, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to continue this discussion. We'll show a little clip about the border and crime again, but I want to talk about the economy and the effects that a lack of border security is having on the economy, plus all the other issues that Joe Biden has created that is crushing people where it hurts the most, and that's in the pocketbook. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. We're talking with Washington State Congressional District 3 candidate Joe Kent here on Training Tuesday.
Hello, I'm Brandon House, and I want to tell you about Numi. This is a swish. You just take 2 capfuls, swish it around your mouth for 3 to 4 minutes, and you're absorbing, according to the studies, glutathione. Now, you don't need to take my word for it. There are over 162,000 studies on PubMed on the power of glutathione. It is a powerful molecule that studies show detoxes our cells. Some studies even show that, well, glutathione might remove mercury from our brains, help to prevent things like Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. Now, look, I'm not making claims. I'm just telling you what the research is showing about the powerful molecule glutathione. Numi is the product that contains glutathione. Melissa and I swish with this twice a day. We urge you to go to Numi.com/house1. That's Numi, Neumi.com/HOWSE and the numeral 1. Begin finding out about the power of glutathione while also supporting this broadcast network. Thank you.
We have a Fox News alert. We have new details about the 2 men arrested in the murder of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nongari in Houston, Texas. Now, multiple DHS sources confirming to Fox News tonight that suspects Johan Jose Rangel Martinez and Franklin Jose Pena Ramos both came into the United States illegally from Venezuela. Both crossed illegally into El Paso earlier this year, caught by Border Patrol, and then, as millions have been done, they were released into the United States. Authorities say that they followed Jocelyn into a convenience store, walked to a bridge, then strangled and killed her, then dumped her body in a creek. The woman who discovered Jocelyn's body the next morning said she thought it was a mannequin floating.
The arrest has taken place. The charges have been filed. Now we want the justice system to do its job. If there was ever a circumstance where you do not give someone bail, this is it.
Joining me now, Tom Homan, former acting ICE director and a Fox News contributor. Tom, good to see you tonight. What can you tell us from your sources?
My sources verify the same thing. Both these people came from Venezuela. Both were arrested at the border in El Paso, one in May and one in March. Just entered. Released by the Border Patrol after their so-called vetting, and released per the DHS guidelines of release. So, yeah, we got another young girl dead because this administration is failing to secure the border. I want people to know something, though. I want you to think about this. Not only is this little girl dead, but take a moment and think about what her last 15, 30 minutes was like. Terrified little girl fighting for her life. They stole the most precious thing from a little girl, then they killed her. Think of what she went through for 30 minutes. The same with Laken Riley and Rachel Moran and that little girl in New York City. This is just not a crime. It's the most vicious crime imaginable, and it's because this administration will not secure the border.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday here, and we're talking with congressional candidate from Washington State and U.S. Special Forces Army veteran Joe Kent about his race against Biden's foot soldier that's in the office out there who votes with the radical leftist agenda each and every time. And Joe, that was just more facts about the horrendous crimes that these illegals are committing. Seems like every day or so now, some little girl is kidnapped or murdered, or all three: kidnapped, raped, murdered. It's just unconscionable. How do these people live with themselves is what I wake up thinking about in the morning when I hear these stories. And on top of all that, the economic impact of what these millions and millions of illegals bring to working people in America is just tragic, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no excuse for our federal government not to secure our border. And what's even crazier is Biden deliberately opened up the border, and then he took away a lot of the executive orders that kept a lot of these so-called asylum seekers out of our country. You heard the Fox News contributor there. He said that these two men had passed vetting. Well, that doesn't mean anything under the new circumstances that Biden has put in. Basically, if you come across the border and you say, hey, I'm claiming asylum, you're automatically given a parole status into the United States. People from Venezuela and a few other countries in South America are given special treatment, so some of them can fly directly into the United States. So this is a controlled invasion by the Biden administration. It's just absolutely appalling that would allow this to happen. But look, all that Biden and the Democrats care about is inflating the census numbers in major urban areas so that they can get more power to create new U.S. House of Representative seats and more electoral college votes. It's a pure power play. They don't care at all about the collateral damage.
Yeah, they don't care at all. And, you know, what it's doing to the economy for American citizens and those folks that are here legally is just devastating. I mean, your opponent has voted to increase spending by $4 trillion or just over her first term here. And that's just printing money. And that's what's driving this out of control inflation. You know, people do have to choose. That's not hyperbole. People really do have to choose between putting gas in their car to get to work and back and buying enough groceries to feed their family up to the standards that most Americans are used to. What are your plans to address, especially the economic issues, once you get into office?
We've got to stop this out of control spending. I mean, Washington, D.C., they learned a long time ago if they raised our taxes that we would vote the people out who raised our taxes. So now, like you said, they just print new money and they pass the inflation onto the working class. It's literally the cruelest tax. So we've got to balance our budget. That's something that hasn't really been done since Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. So we've got to do the bills individually, individual appropriations bills, no more omnibuses, no more continuing resolutions. And we're going to have to do a lot of cuts in the federal government. The government is bloated. A lot of it's been weaponized against the American people. And so we've got to get that spending under control. We take in nearly 4.5 to 5 trillion in tax revenue. The federal government has to live off of that, just like every single American has to lay out their budget and make both ends meet and make everything balanced. The federal government's got to do the same thing. We've also got to get back to being energy independent. Biden's war on U.S. energy is what started this cycle of inflation, and then came the 4 trillion in new spending, additional government regulations. businesses. We've got to do a lot of deregulation to get Washington, D.C. out of people's business here in Washington 3 and across the country. And then that energy independence, I think, is absolutely critical to get some instant relief to the American people. Because if we can turn back on U.S. energy and start driving down the price at the pump, that's going to start driving down the price of all the daily goods like groceries and stuff that people rely on every single day. But it's going to be a hard fight because the D.C., especially the bureaucracy, is addicted to money printing.
Oh, they sure are, and they're addicted to policies that have the adverse effect on the American people. I think your opponent, she opposed, American businesses being preferred in things like electric vehicle battery manufacturing and those kind of things, which favors the Chinese Communist Party, our number one adversary in the world. That's building up to go to war with us, from what all of the reporting and intelligence sources that I have are saying.
That's exactly right. I mean, Biden's war on U.S. energy and basically on anything that's not an EV, this mandate where they want to try and move away from combustion engines. My opponent has directly supported that in her time in Congress. And also she's allowed for non-American companies, in particular Chinese companies, to bid on U.S. government contracts, really circumventing American labor. When the Democrats claim to be the party of the labor and the union, but basically between their immigration policies and their offshoring policies, they are working directly against the American working class and the American working man and woman. So in the sake of doing what's right for our own workers, we've got to fix that and protect American jobs and American labor, but also for our own national security. We've got to get these foreign actors, in particular the Chinese Communist Party, out of our markets. And this transition rapidly to EVs, economically, it's a horrible idea, but also it puts us at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party. That's got to end.
Yeah, I've done a lot of writing recently about the electric vehicle policy that Biden's trying to force onto a country that just doesn't have the market share for that. You're out and about talking to the people in the 3rd District. I'm just curious, what are they telling you about this issue?
Yeah, nobody is excited right now in this economy to be forced to go out and buy I don't know, $50,000 to $60,000 EV. And look, the infrastructure just isn't there. Most people know that this is a joke. However, between Biden and then our governor and our state legislature, there is a lot of rapid conversions that are being forced by the government onto people that are just trying to run businesses and live their daily lives. Our own state government here has a war on natural gas stoves. Of all the problems we have, they pick natural gas stoves to go after. But it's just absolute insanity. And look, the infrastructure is just not there. This technology isn't ready for it. I think at some point, maybe the free market will do its thing and there will be some form of a conversion. But right now, these technologies, these so-called green technologies, just aren't ready for prime time. It's very debatable if they're even better for the actual environment. So people are really just furious about Washington, D.C. and bureaucrats in Olympia getting up in their business and telling them how they have to live their lives, especially if it's going to incur more costs upon them and their businesses.
Yeah, you would think a common sense would apply when I fly over this country or just drive 150 miles on any road. You don't even think about the number of gasoline stations there are because they're so plentiful. But if I had an electric vehicle, I would have to map out where the charging stations are, and I would have to stop more frequently. I think President Trump said last week at a rally, talking about the big tractor trailer rigs, talking to transportation companies that say that, they can make it from New York City to Los Angeles on one tank of fuel without stopping with these big rigs today. But they'd have to stop like 6 times just on one leg of the trip, on the way out there, in order to get their vehicles charged up. And that costs time, in more maintenance, and the weight, I guess, of the batteries. That's going to tear up the interstates. So the interstates will have to be re-engineered. It's really unbelievable. Well, we do have a live audience, and I normally take a question from them. And there's a hand up over there. We're going to go over there, but I haven't been hearing them during the break, so we may be having an audio issue. Let's go ahead. Shell is our host over there. Shell, I see that Sofa King's got his hand up. Go ahead and try with the question.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel. And thank you, Mr. Kent, hopefully soon to be Congressman Kent. You mentioned in the first segment about looking up your opponent's voting history. I know down here in Texas we have a very similar problem, and what happened down here is there were a lot of Texas-specific resources that voters can go to look up candidates' voting histories. Do you have something similar like that in Washington State? And if so, could you call them out?
Yeah, actually, we made it really easy. If you go to my website, joekentforcongress.com, there's the initial square where we ask you for money. If you can donate, that's great. But if you just scroll down, there's a yellow square that says Learn the Truth About Marie Perez. If you click on that, that takes you to a landing page where you can go topic by topic, whether it's the economy, border security. It explains what she voted on, and then it provides a hyperlink to the actual House record. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can check it right there. So go to joekentforcongress.com. We update that every single time there's a vote in Congress.
Well done. Well done. Asked for money and told them where to go to find that voting record, Joe. Well, we got to take another break. When we come back, we'll show a little clip titled Bidenomics is Digging America's Grave. And I'm smiling when I say that because this is an entertainment show too, but I'm dead serious. We've got a problem, folks, here in America, and we need men like Joe Kent to step into this breach for us and correct this problem. We'll be right back on Training Tuesday on the Rob Maness Show live on World YouTube and X Spaces simulcast.
Is Bidenomics digging America's economic grave? That's the subject of the riff. So the average voter watching the upcoming CNN presidential debate probably won't recognize the term modern monetary theory. But if Mr. Trump refers to unlimited federal spending, borrowing, money printing, inflating, taxing, or regulating, well then, the average viewer will have an aha moment. I recognize that. It's called Bidenomics. Art Laffer and Steve Moore, who'll be here in just a moment, write about it in the Wall Street Journal today. And the Journal editorial page talks about tax Armageddon. Newt Gingrich refers to so-called modern monetary theory as big government socialism. Spot on, Newt. Some common sense principles contradicting Joe Biden is you can't tax your way into prosperity, nor can you inflate into prosperity, nor can you devalue your currency into prosperity. That's just a few thoughts that any middle-class voter can identify with. Mr. Biden may never admit it, but the Journal is right. Should the Democrats regain the White House and Congress, they'll hold middle-class tax cuts hostage to a huge overall tax hike. Left-wing luminaries like Senator Elizabeth Warren and Ron Wyden, they're in favor of imposing a wealth tax on anybody making $50 to $100 million bucks. They and many other Democrats would be perfectly happy with an unrealized capital gains tax. Unfortunately, last week's Supreme Court decision leaves the door open to that wealth confiscating idea. And as we have noted, the latest Congressional Budget Office baseline scorecard now shows $2 trillion deficits, as far as the eye can see, leading to a $51 trillion federal debt by the end of the next decade. A tidy borrowing sum, and that would get you to 122% of GDP. In peacetime, no less, without any emergency, even nearly full employment. John Maynard Keynes should be turning over in his grave. Milton Friedman has already spoken to me from his grave. Even Shakespeare's "Alas, poor York, grave digger" should have worried that more Bidenomics would dig an even larger grave for the entire American economy. Just saying. And that's my riff.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking with Special Forces veteran and congressional candidate from District 3 out in Washington State, Joe Kent, today about his campaign against his opponent, who, I'll say it, she's on the leftist radical agenda that is talking about a $51 trillion debt, Joe. I mean, $36 trillion is where we're at now. And at $51 trillion, we're going to be over 150% of our GDP, which is thought to be impossible to sustain at any kind of prosperity for the American people if we go down that road.
I think it's really just national suicide. I mean, we have one of the most blessed nations in the entire world. We have all the natural resources that we need. We have basically 3 Saudi Arabias in oil and natural gas sitting beneath our soil, yet we've offshored that. And now all we do is we print money and we pass the inflation on to the American people. But at the same time, the only reason we can print money is because we're the world's reserve currency holder. We rely on the rest of the world to need the dollar. But if we look what's been taking place since Biden came into office, we have our weakness has led to China and the BRICS nations like Russia moving in on our status as reserve currency holders. So really right now we're on a deck of cards. I don't even know if we'd make it to the $100 trillion deficit mark without our economy and our currency crashing in a very, very major way. And look, we've talked about the threat that China poses. China fights through asymmetrical warfare. They fight through unrestricted warfare. This war against our currency, while we're still dependent on China, is part and parcel of that. And we are walking right into their trap. Meanwhile, we're destroying the American working class. So people like my opponent who just think that we can, print money out of thin air and $4 trillion in 2 years is no big deal. The American people will just kind of suck it up. That just doesn't work anymore. We've really got to think differently, or this entire system that we've all really come to benefit from and build our country on, it's going to come down right on top of us.
Yeah, we beat on the Democrats, and they deserve it because they are borderline communism and command economy at this point. But we have some Republicans in Congress that they're going along with this stuff, passing the continuing resolutions, continuing the policy, funding the policies and everything. That's your challenge when you get there. How are you going to approach that challenge with your colleagues that don't tend to want to cut the government?
We've just got to dig our heels in. So I'm endorsed by the Freedom Caucus. I really like where the Freedom Caucus head is in terms of just following the Constitution, being very liberty-minded, but also they're financial hawks. They're the ones that put the stipulations into the speaker's negotiation about having a cap on spending, about doing individual appropriations bills, no more earmarks, no more omnibuses or continuing resolutions, and actually giving the American people some transparency. And so, like you said, unfortunately, because of special interests and really, I think probably just the status quo in DC, even some Republicans are against this. And, when the omnibus comes about, there's some pork in there for their district and they end up voting for it. We've got to get away from that. I think in the last 2 years, we've made a lot of gains in getting Republicans to think, hey, we've got to be the party of fiscal responsibility because this is going to crush the American people. And I think a lot of Americans are really waking up to it too. People who might not understand or even really care about which economic term is the most appropriate, they understand what the grocery bill was just 2-3 years ago, or even 4 years ago, and where they're at right now. And they know that this current status quo isn't sustainable. So I think we've got to make the promise and then do everything we can and literally die on the political hill of balancing the budget and not spending our nation into oblivion.
Yeah, I was looking at a meme before we came on the air that's going around. It's got cheeseburger on one side and a Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets, I think, on the other side of it. And it says, "This is Joe Biden's America." The cheeseburger under Trump was a little bit over $1. Now it's a little bit over $3, so a 200% increase. And the Chick-fil-A numbers were over a 96% increase in the price of fast food. And fast food, is you could think what you want about it, but it used to be an inexpensive way to get a hot meal in your belly, especially if you were among the working poor. And now they're priced out of it, for goodness sake. So that's going to cause all kinds of issues, not to mention the fact that the wages are not keeping up with inflation. His team likes to brag that wages have increased, but inflation's increased 4 percentage points higher and outpaced any wage increases. So effectively not happening at all because of these policies.
That's exactly right. I had a friend of mine who doesn't really follow politics say to me, "Hey, I don't need to watch the State of the Union every day when I get my grocery bill or I go to the gas pump. That's the State of the Union." And so I really think when the Biden administration rolls out these charts and these graphs and these press releases and slick ads, the American people aren't buying it. And I get people that come to my events all the time who say, "Hey, I haven't voted in a long time. I don't know if I'm a Republican or a Democrat. Quite frankly, I don't care. But I know I can't live in this economy. I'm making the same amount of money or maybe even a little bit more money, but I can't afford groceries anymore." And especially for younger people that are just entering the workforce that someday want to be able to buy a home, that basically has become unattainable. I mean, the median housing price, like in my district alone for a standard basic house, is close to $500,000. It's just absolute insanity. So I think people are really seeing this. They're seeing that their financial futures and really their financial reality is being destroyed every single day. I think that's bringing folks over to our side. So it's going to be incumbent upon us, if we have a very big victory, like I think we're going to in 2024 and 2025, to really get serious about balancing the budget and stopping the trajectory that we're on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. My 19-year-old son, when I talk to him about his outlook on the future, he really has no interest in getting married at this point. He's not interested in going to college. He's going to do technical training school to be an automotive specialist because that's what he likes. He likes muscle cars. I don't know how you can be born in the 2000s and grow up and in 2024 be a muscle car guy, but it still exists. So that's what he wants to do. But when he talks to me about it, he doesn't talk in the terms that where you and I probably would have when we were that age, about the future and knowing the country's going to be here and that his kids and their kids will be okay. He never talks about that. And when you ask him about it, he goes, "Well, I'm just not sure what's going to happen, Dad. Look what's happening around us." So the outlook of young people is very, very interesting these days, and they see it. Like you said, they don't need to watch TV or the State of the Union message. They see it every day when they're filling up their car with gas, getting their $10.31 an hour paycheck from wherever it is they're working, and they can't afford to either eat or get gas. They can't do both. They have to manage that budget and figure it out. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy, I think, sometimes for us older people to say, "Oh, these kids these days, they don't want to work," or whatever. But if you look at the economic environment that this generation, Gen Z and the younger millennials are coming into, it's really hopeless. Like I never thought really for a minute growing up that I wouldn't be able to afford a house or a lifestyle similar to the one that my parents provided for me. But nowadays, I mean, if you go out there and you talk to young people that are like your son's age, they're very realistic. And as a matter of fact, when I hear them describe to me what they think their future is going to be, it makes me very sad and frustrated at the same time, especially after spending so long defending this country and seeing that this is the future we're passing on to the generations that came behind us. It's very, very frustrating. And it's all self-inflicted. This all came from the Biden administration and Washington, D.C., and leaders who haven't had the best interest of the American people in mind. So we can reverse it. It's going to be a hard fight. I think it's incumbent upon us to give that younger generation some hope.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we need to continue to take leadership roles. Even I'm well beyond where I thought I would be in taking a public leadership role in our country. But we have to keep doing that because without us leading them to understand and having a belief in the United States and its future, there won't be anybody else there to help them along that way. So that when they're there by themselves and we're gone, they can do that for their children and grandchildren. We're in a pretty precarious situation, Joe. And I have to say that I appreciate you running and everything. When we come back from this break, I want to talk about national security and what's happening in the world. I'm not being hyperbolic in my intro when I talk about us being at the brink of World War III due to the poor decision making of Joe Biden and his administration. Of course, there are external actors like the Communist Chinese Party really is in unrestricted warfare against the United States specifically, but they're also leading a coalition now that, because of our decision making, has really come together over the last 2 years since the beginning of the Ukraine war and Russia going into Ukraine with combat forces. So we'll be right back with Joe Kent on the Rob Maness Show live on Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast. It's Training Tuesday.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Breaking overnight, new tensions on the Korean Peninsula. South Korea's military firing warning shots after soldiers from the north crossed the border between the two countries briefly. It comes ahead of a rare visit to North Korea by Russia's Vladimir Putin. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frer's got the latest on all of it. Janice, let's start with this incident on the border. What do we know?
Savannah, good morning. Ahead of Vladimir Putin's first visit to North Korea in over 2 decades, warning shots were fired by South Korean soldiers at the demilitarized zone, the DMZ that divides North and South Korea. Now, according to South Korea's military, it happened when a group of North Korean soldiers, about 20 or 30 of them, heavily armed, briefly crossed the military demarcation line. Now, officials say it did not seem intentional, but this is the second time in just over a week that it's happened. North Korea has been sending troops to this border area to do construction work and to plant landmines, measures seen as preventing defectors from crossing into the south. Adding to tension, reports that multiple North Korean soldiers were killed in landmine explosions on the north side of the DMZ. This, according to South Korea, officials not saying exactly when that happened, but they are calling it a separate incident.
And Janice, as mentioned, this comes ahead of Putin's visit today. U.S. officials watching that very closely. Why is the Russian president visiting North Korea?
Well, Putin is set to meet with Kim Jong-un. They last met 9 months ago when Kim traveled to eastern Russia. Putin's main goal is to shore up military ties and a supply line, namely artillery shells and rockets, with the war in Ukraine dragging on and Russia facing shortages in their weapons supplies. North Korea has supported Russia with munitions, according to the U.S. and to South Korea, while Moscow, in turn, has given aid and other technologies, though both countries deny their skirting sanctions. Still, the White House has called this deepening relationship concerning because of how it's feeding not only the war in Ukraine, but instability on the Korean Peninsula. Savannah.
All right, Janice Mackey-Frer.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show live on World YouTube and X Spaces simulcast. It's Training Tuesday, and my guest today is Special Forces veteran and congressional candidate in Washington's District 3, Joe Kent, who is running against an opponent that has voted for and supported the decisions that have led to those headlines. And Joe, I got to admit, it's been a long time since we've seen headlines about that much increased tension across the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. As a matter of fact, when President Trump was in office, that headline was really not thinkable for the foreseeable future, quite honestly. And now we're back to that, and we have made decisions that have led to this alliance between Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, and other various and sundry bad actors, both nation states and illegal entities like terrorist organizations, that is also creating more opportunity for involvement in organizations like BRICS, which you mentioned before, that's going after, U.S. being the world's reserve currency, and those kinds of things. So we've made these decisions. I wanted to ask you, from a foreign policy and national security perspective, what types of policy recommendations and advocacy will you be doing as a congressman for Washington State when it comes to the situation, especially, let's just start with the Russia-Ukraine situation?
Yeah, we've got to get that conflict to a ceasefire. Right now, we have continued escalation. We've talked about what's happening on the economic stage. We really forced this alliance between Russia and China at the beginning of the Ukraine war, when we threw Russia off the SWIFT system, when we weaponized the dollar against Russia, and now we're starting to seize Russian assets in the dollar. You've got the rest of the world saying, well, hey, if I run afoul of the Americans, they're simply going to seize my assets. And we also push Russia right into the arms of China, which, if you go back to the Cold War, that's the entire reason why Nixon went to China. He was trying to drive a wedge between Russia and China, between one of the world's biggest labor forces and labor markets and one of the world's biggest natural resource producers. We forced that, and now we have this BRICS alliance that's including, North Korea. Putin has been warning about the provocations that America has been taking. We just authorized, without any authorization from Congress whatsoever, we authorized American missiles to be shot into Russia, and we saw an attack on Sevastopol in Crimea that killed some civilians, and that was done with American munitions. And so now we've got American missiles being shot into territorial Russia. We've got a Russian naval presence off the coast of Florida, in Cuba, and right now we're closer, I think, to World War III or a nuclear exchange than we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. So all of our efforts have to be on getting this conflict frozen and negotiations to begin. Ukraine is running out of people. That's why it really doesn't matter how much more weapons or billions of dollars that we send over there. That's why the Ukrainians are desperately trying to get NATO involved, because they're simply out of people. And if we get NATO involved, that's the immediate begin of actually a kinetic World War III between us and Russia. And we, the American people, have to ask ourselves, for what? Before the war, Ukraine was like our 65th trading partner. It is not in our vital national security interest for us to get into a nuclear conflict with Russia over a country that, quite frankly, is not in our vital national security interest. Now, mind you, all of this is taking place on the world stage while we can't even secure our own border. DC will print hundreds of billions of dollars, give us more inflation, worrying about other countries' national security, but we don't even have a secure southern border. So we've got to get our priorities straight. Peace has got to be a priority, and the security of our southern border has got to be a priority.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you just said. When it comes to the difference in priorities, it's my position and many others that are what I call realpolitik, foreign policy and national security advocates using realism theory, is that China really is our number one adversary because of the size of their economy. They've almost doubled their intercontinental ballistic missile force in the last 3 years since the last Indo-PACOM commander took office. He said that in his outgoing remarks. Last year, they built, I think, 17 capital naval vessel ships, and we retired somewhere between 4 and 7 and didn't build any. Our merchant marine shipping is, I did a show on that a few weeks ago with Elbridge Colby, and we talked about it. And China has a massive merchant marine manufacturing capability where they're talking about getting 1,700 ships built in that category, and we're talking about building 5. They dwarf our workforce in the shipbuilding area, and that gets to my question: is are you going to be taking a look at the American industrial base and all these things that we've offshored that really, from a national security perspective, we have to get them reshored and restarted here in the United States as soon as possible, because we can't have peace through strength, which is what I believe in, what President Trump, the policy approach that he takes to national security, without a manufacturing base.
That's 100% right. I mean, in terms of actually being secure and being able to produce what we need ourselves, especially for our own defense, it's insanity to think that we can't do that here anymore, that we gutted out our industrial base. We won World War II by and large because we had a very robust and efficient military industrial base. And since really the end of the Second World War and allowing China to enter the global market and become a behemoth of manufacturing because they use slave labor, not only has that put American workers last, it's also made us dependent essentially on our number one geostrategic enemy. And China's capitalizing on that. While we were distracted providing security guarantees and trying to play world police for the entire world, trying to spread democracy through the barrel of a gun, China was gobbling up natural resources, key ports, and building their domestic military industrial base up. So we've really taken our eye off the ball, and we've got to focus on the strength portion at home first. And that strength portion will generate the peace through strength. But we've got to get very, very serious about that. We've got to have a serious plan on how we're going to implement that. And that's something that we really must focus on in Congress. I hope we can take back the Senate as well, and that we get President Trump back in there, because we can't continue to have Joe Biden playing footsie with the Chinese while provoking wars on every single major front while we don't have a military industrial base.
Yeah, and weakness invites aggression. That's why we use the phrase peace through strength. And that's not even a modern term. It goes back to, I think, the Emperor Hadrian is the first one to use words similar to that effect. But speaking of weakness and rotten at the core, your opponent has voted for all these woke diversity, equity, inclusion policies in the United States military that is running away from a meritocracy approach when it comes to picking who gets promoted, who gets trained as a fighter pilot or a bomber pilot or an infantry officer, and those kind of things. And it's devastating the internal working of the officer corps, and it's calling into question the ethics, the leadership ability of the general and flag officers. We just saw Catherine Herridge broke a story yesterday about Carolina Stancic and what the Army has said, where she's in line of duty for COVID vaccine injuries, but another part of the Army is saying, no, it's too nebulous, we're not going to take care of her. That's the kind of rot that we're facing while we're facing this huge adversary of the Chinese Communist Party that is overbuilding and outnumbering us. They may not be ahead of us quality-wise, but there is a quality and quantity all into itself. And they're outpacing us right now, and while we're rotting our own core out from the inside. What's your approach going to be to that before I let you go?
Yeah, so my opponent, who never served a day in her life, and I don't think she can find most of the countries that we're in conflict with on the map right now, she hasn't found a war that she doesn't want to fund. So she's voted for all this foreign aid, all the escalations in Ukraine, voted to leave our troops in the Middle East, and we lost 3 troops over there right after that. But then she'll turn around and she'll support the Democrats' plan to include DEI, to include abortion services, transgender surgeries into the Department of Defense's fundings. So she wants an extremely woke military. I personally think what Joe Biden has done to our military has been absolutely catastrophic, and it's really rather impressive how quickly he's been able to do it. When Biden swore in as the president, we had the most battle-hardened military that we've ever had before. We went to war for over 20 years with an all-volunteer force. And you and I know that we were part of the all-volunteer force. But every other time our country's gone to war, we actually had to hold a draft. For 20 years of the war on terror, even at the height of it, when guys were coming back in body bags from Fallujah or from Sangin every single week, we didn't have a recruiting crisis. Biden comes in, he shoves the vax mandate down our troops' throats. He then says, hey, I think, 3/4 of you guys might be violent domestic terrorists, so we're going to start looking through your Facebook post and to see if you have a Gadsden flag bumper sticker. And then the Afghan withdrawal that just showed a complete and total lack of leadership, lack of accountability. And now we have a major recruiting crisis. And so our military is extremely hollowed out right now, while at the same time, Joe Biden and Democrats like Marie Perez continue to provoke wars all over the world. So I can't think of a more dangerous scenario than we're facing right now. So we've got to get really serious. We've got to strip out all this DEI nonsense, all this transgender ideology out of our military and go back to promoting people based on their capability to lead, and get the military laser focused on closing with and destroying the enemy and being ready to fight tonight. That's it.
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. Give your website one more time before we close it out, sir.
Yep, JoeKentForCongress.com.
Absolutely. Go donate to this man. Volunteer if you can. Help him out. We've got to win these seats. Trump's got to have a Republican Congress with leaders like Joe Kent. Thanks a lot, Joe. We will see you tomorrow on the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. Mike Gonzalez will be talking about his new book, The Next Generation Marxism, what it is and how to combat it, because that's very important. That's what Joe Kent's doing out there in Washington 3. Go support him. I'm Rob Maness at World YouTube and X Spaces Simulcast. I'll see you tomorrow.